Hey kids, Mr. King here. I am here to teach you another drawing lesson on texture. Right here I got a nice little porcupine for you because I was thinking about talking about the texture of fur and spikes and spines and hair and things like that. The different ways that you can tackle it. So we can see our porcupine right here, his spines right there on his back. That's the dangerous part. You get stuck with those, they come right off his back, and they hurt. But you can even see on him, he's even got some fur up here, and some of it that really sticks up and seems almost like hair, and the whiskers up front too. So, bust out that pencil, get out that paper, and get ready because we're going to try to get this done. So, your first move. Once you've got your pencil in place, one thing I would tell you always to do is to break your subject down into simpler shapes. So if I'm looking at this porcupine right here, I realize, hey, I'm seeing basically a big triangle. I'm going to curve the back of it because the way his fur comes off there is curved too. And then at the front of the triangle, instead of coming to a dead point, that's where his cute little nose is going to be. So let's curve up the head right here, bring the hair up off of him. And remember, when you're drawing, it doesn't need to be perfection. You know, you don't want it to get hung up on it being exactly like the drawing. So I'm just bringing his mouth down just a little bit right here. But if yours doesn't look just like mine, or you actually did better than I did, well, if you did better than I did, I'm just going to cry about it later. But don't worry about it. It's not too bad. So what I'm doing right here that I wanted to show you, I'll zoom in so you can see, is I was actually drawing my fur, this fine fur, as just these back and forth zigzags. And what that does is we're capturing the basic shape that fur makes. And you can see right here that fur, if I put a little red behind my marks here so you can see, kind of makes this spiky shape. So it does kind of fit pretty well to do that zigzag to represent the fur there. So there's one method, and that's a little bit kind of illustrative cartoony, but it's usually how I start fur and texture like that. Anyways. Before we get way too far along with it, let's capture that eye. So when we're doing the eye, one really fun thing to remember is that once you create your circle, if you leave a circle or two for the glare, which is like where the light collects the shine on the eye, that really can help you make it look a little more realistic. Now let's get those little kind of pinched almond shapes on the end of it, like the real thing. And oh yeah, we're getting really, that is one nice porcupine eye right there. So mine is actually set back a little bit further than it would be on the real thing, but that's okay. And if you notice, there's actually not so much fur right around his eye, I assume, so you can just, see a little better. So you can even draw the shape that makes where there is no fur there, and then we'll come in there and tackle that a little better later. All right, so we're moving along quick. The big difference is when you get up to the fur on the top right there, where it's really like kind of sparse, that's where I would switch to a different technique, which is a line technique. So you're just going to draw those individual fur lines. Now, if you do that everywhere, if you do that all over your porcupine, you are going to notice that you have just this really not so great looking porcupine in the end. It's going to look like somehow that he's like balding or something like that. And the reason is because if you draw those individual hairlines, there are so many actual hairs there that you'll drive yourself nuts. And just as importantly, too, you'll just be doing it kind of injustice because if you look, the hair does actually make shapes up here. That when we back away from it and we see where the light and the shadow falls, it makes shapes. So stick with the shapes in a lot of the areas that are like really covered in fine fur, but where the hair is much more sparse, you can draw the individual ones, especially where it's like a fine, thin hair. And then we'll do another little technique where we use the side of our pencil for the larger spines in just a minute. So one thing I want to point out, remember, simplify, figure out this geometric shape. So for his little cute little foot sticking out there, I'm actually going to break that down into kind of this triangle shape right here, which is what I see. And then that back leg we can't forget about, the front leg that is behind him is going to stick down right here. Let's get those back feet. So we're going to do this shape right here, and then there's that back foot sticking out like this, like he's taking that step. And the one thing I didn't do is I didn't actually draw the feet on the end, so then I'm just going to break that down like so. I kind of make them into like, I feel like these are like duck feet, like what am I trying to say? Webbed feet. Oh, I could not think of the word. And that's just fine, anywhere that kind of makes it easier for you to see it. All right, we're cranking around along here. One other thing I want to point out is another way to handle texture is not even to worry about the texture itself, but to look at the light and the shadow. So what I'm talking about is, check this out. This whole area up here is just one big shadow. This area is a big shadow. So when I go to draw that on my porcupine, I might not even draw the fur itself. I might just draw that shaded area. And then I'll get over here, shadow that one in. And then what I do is that when I start getting away from the shadows, that's where, as I leave the shadows, I focus more on creating an actual texture. So this is just dark shadow, but then on the ends of it, I'm going to create just little lines, and those are going to show you the direction. And the one thing is important, you got to pay attention to the direction of the fur, because that actually helps with that realism. So I'm noticing the fur kind of comes down along his back, down along his arms. And I'm doing this the fast way, so this isn't the prettiest in the world, but I think you guys are getting the idea. Really had a moment there where I almost jumped out of doing the fur and darkened in the nose, because I was like, oh, you know what, I just really want to do that. But let's keep a little workflow to this. Now the hair back on the back leg is darkened in because it's in shadow, just like the foot. And there are some bits of light on his nails, but we're not even going to worry about that because they're so faint and so tiny that it just doesn't really matter. I wouldn't, don't get hung up on little tiny details until you get the big stuff done. Okay, if you really want to add polish to the end of your drawing to it. Okay, so the big spines. Now we're going to use a little bit more of, I don't want to go too far, the stylus is kind of hard to work with, but a little bit more with the side of our pencil. Oop, not quite. And we are going to try to add larger, there it is. Sorry, it's a little harder on the computer, but these a little bit more, kind of like, oh, look at these, very confident spines, I'll call them. So I'm going to add those one by one because the real thing has this big spines on it. And if you wanted to add another level of realism, I would go back in with your eraser and do the white stripes with the eraser into your black lines. Now that is going to be painstaking, but if you really want to make it look, very real and very cool that way, you can. I think this guy looks enough of the porcupine, even as is. I wouldn't even, to me, that's just too much work. One thing to pay attention to is you can still see the shadow of where his little butt is over here. So if you want to, I think it's a smart idea to use the side of your pencil to shade in right underneath where you've drawn there to give him a little bum. And to give him his body. And remember that even under the lines that you did on the side of the body, you're probably going to want to use the side of your pencil to gently shade the whole guy in here, the whole porcupine, because all those shadows are still visible underneath. There is a little bit of shading on his head there, especially around the bottom of the mouth. And then I'm just going to do some details in the mouth here. Whoops, whoa, went way too far with that line. A little bit on there. And remember, when you guys make these mistakes, instead of hitting the back button like I am, you're just busting out that eraser. I constantly flip over my eraser, wear it out, all that. And yeah, I'm already starting to really dig. My eraser is out of control. I'm really starting to dig what I got here so far. So, yeah, he's looking like a porcupine. So right now I'm erasing some of those lines that I left in to guide the basic shapes, but I'm gonna leave them a little bit for you there. You guys can see I'm getting a nice little porcupine here. And then the very last things that I would do is I would just go in there and I just keep adding the bits of detail where I want to. I'd add the fur along the legs here. But really, you just use those different techniques. You're creating shapes with the fur, you're creating thin lines, and you're creating more kind of, let me see if I can get my stylus again. It's very challenging to get. There we go. Those kind of more beefy, confident lines in there for the different stuff. And then also looking at the light and shadow as it appears on your subject. That's it, guys. That's really all there is to it. There's a lot of practice involved, and there's no substitute for that practice. You just got to put in the time and be patient with yourself because you're learning, and that's what you should be doing. So there's my porcupine so far. I'm going to keep working on him. He's got a bit of a salt shaker butt right now, and I can definitely work on fixing that. But for a starter, he ain't bad. All right, so I'll catch you guys next time. This is the advanced texture drawing piece. I'll come out with a little kid one coming up soon. Bye bye.